We will try to address them within the chat box itself. And also we will be taking a moment at the end to do as much Q&A as possible. We want to be able to answer your questions. We will try to address them. All right, I'm going to give folks just a minute more because I see the stream of participants is slowing down a bit. Again, just one more reminder, we will be trying to answer as many questions as possible, so please use that chat box. For those that want it or need it, there's also a live transcript that's being turned on right now, so you'll be able to kind of read a closed captioning of today's discussion. It is automated, so it's 99% accurate, but you may see every once in a while a funky word here and there. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it to Sabrina from our team, who's going to get us started.
Thanks, Cody, and thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Sabrina. I'm the Director of Outreach at Student Debt Crisis Center. I am also enrolled in public service loan forgiveness and am taking advantage of this temporary waiver. So there's a lot for all of us to be learning today. Let's jump right in and go to the next slide. So today we're joined by Student Debt Crisis Center, our organization, and Savvy, but I'll toss it to Savvy later on in the presentation to kind of present about who they are and what it is that they do. Next slide. So for today's clinic, we'll be discussing the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program known as PSLF. So if you hear us say PSLF, that's what we are referring to. The temporary PSLF waiver and other recent policy updates. You may be seeing a lot of conversation surrounding student debt and any action from the president in terms of payment pause. So we've been monitoring that as well. And as we hear things, we'll be communicating with you as well. But we are mindful of that. But we also know that the PSLF temporary waiver is something that you should definitely consider and take into consideration, as it can really help millions of borrowers have their debt canceled or bring them even closer to having all of their debt canceled. So at the end, we'll also share an online tool by Savvy to help you understand your repayment options and enroll in public service loan forgiveness. And then just a reminder that we always say in every presentation that we are not financial counselors or attorneys. We're advocates and experts who really want to just help you. Next slide. So we're going to be covering important updates related to COVID-19 relief. So payment pause news and all of that, student loan repayment, and loan forgiveness programs. So for COVID-19 relief for borrowers, payments are currently suspended and interest waived for federally held student loans until August 31st, 2022. So I know a lot of us, including myself as a borrower, are on the edge of our seats waiting to hear from the president on whether the pause will be extended. So hopefully that's something that we'll be hearing in the coming days. This suspension counts towards public service loan forgiveness and default rehabilitation. So while you're enrolled in PSLF, each month that the payments have been paused, you are being given credits to count towards the 120 credits needed for this program. And we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. Borrowers can recertify their income for an IDR program, an income-driven repayment program, if their income changes during this time. Next slide. For borrowers in default, tax and Social Security withholdings for federally held student loans in default are suspended. So any wage garnishments, Social Security garnishments should be suspended during this payment pause. For borrowers in default, employers are instructed to halt wage garnishments, and borrowers did have their wages garnished are entitled to receive refunds. So that's something that you are eligible for if that was the case for you. So collection activities like calls and letters to defaulted borrowers are paused. So the first update we'll be talking about is in relation to student loan servicers. So you might be hearing a lot of information about Navient or FedLoan or Granite State, because of these three federal student loan servicers announced that they will no longer be servicing federal loans. So that's about 16 million student loan borrowers, or 35% of all student loan borrowers, who will be getting a new loan servicer in the near future. So one thing that we highly recommend is keeping any paperwork related to your loans. If you received any notice of your loans being transferred to a new servicer, make sure that you have any paperwork, any information that you can keep on hand to keep track of all of your payments, all of your information. So FedLoan was the sole company handling the PSLF program, and they will continue processing forms until loans are transferred to MOHELA starting in July 2022. So if you've seen anything or received any notice of your loans being transferred to MOHELA, that's because FedLoan servicer is no longer going to be servicing. So the second update is in relation to income-driven repayment. So addressing forbearance steering with a one-time account adjustment to count certain long-term forbearances towards IDR and PSLF. So those who have been continuously put into forbearance without them knowing, or just being pushed there without being given other options. Increase progress towards IDR forgiveness by conducting a one-time revision of IDR payments to address past inaccuracies, and immediate debt cancellation for 40,000 borrowers under PSLF. So thousands will be able to receive forgiveness through IDR, and millions will receive credit towards IDR forgiveness. Most importantly, that we've been talking about is the PSLF waiver. So the Department of Education announced a limited public service loan forgiveness waiver that allows all payments by student borrowers to count towards PSLF, regardless of loan program or payment plan. They will be reviewing denied PSLF applications for errors and giving borrowers the ability to have their PSLF determinations reconsidered. So if you have applied for PSLF in the past and you have been denied because you were in the wrong payment plan, or because you had the wrong loan and you needed to consolidate, whatever it may be, you should take advantage of this waiver, because you do have the chance to have that rectified and for you to get forgiveness once again. So they will automatically provide credit towards PSLF for military service members and federal employees using federal data matches. And targeted debt cancellation. So the Department of Education is set to discharge $5.8 billion in student debt for 560,000 borrowers who attended Corinthian colleges, automatic cancellation for 323,000 borrowers who have a total and permanent disability made through a data match with the Social Security Administration, and billions of dollars in debt cancellation for former students who attended colleges like ITT Tech, the Art Institute, and Westwood College. So we saw a few headlines about ITT Tech recently in the media, talking about debt cancellation for thousands of borrowers. So these are important aspects to talk about in terms of targeted debt cancellation. At SDCC, we also advocate for broad-based debt cancellation for everyone, but targeted debt cancellation is also really important and helps many individuals. So now I'm going to toss it to our Executive Director, Cody, to take over the next few slides.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sabrina. We've really taken what is typically a very long workshop and tried to distill this, because our intention today was to really talk about public service loan forgiveness. If you are eligible for public service loan forgiveness, you probably have heard that there's new expanded rules under what we call the PSLF waiver, and I'm going to get into that here in a minute. But I do want to just check one thing off just at the top of my section here, which is a lot of people have already put in the chat that they want to know about student debt cancellation broadly. You're probably hearing a lot about news reports that something could happen in the next few days. We do not know the answer to that, but what I want to say is that regardless of what happens with broad debt cancellation, public service loan forgiveness is still a very important program for those who are eligible. And for those that want to qualify under these new expanded rules, there is a deadline at the end of October that you still need to meet. So I'm glad you're all here. This is all still really important and urgent information, regardless of everything else that's happening in the student loan world. All right, so let's go to the next slide and let's jump in for public service loan forgiveness. It's what brought us all here in the first place. So I just want to start explaining broadly what the program is. So public service loan forgiveness started in October of 2007. And the way the program works is that a borrower must make 120 monthly payments while working for a public service employer to qualify for total loan forgiveness. This is cumulative. So I did see some folks already in the chat who said that they've worked a few years at a nonprofit and now they're at a for-profit business. You can always go back. It's a total of 120 monthly payments, not a consecutive 120 monthly payments. And after you've made those 120 monthly payments and you've met other qualifying factors I'm going to discuss, all of your remaining debt is forgiven, and it's forgiven tax-free. So you can see how powerful this program can be, and it's why we spent so much time talking about it. Now, for a borrower to really benefit from public service loan forgiveness, they do need to figure out how to lower their basic monthly payment. The way our student loan system is designed is if you are not in an affordable repayment program, you would pay off your student loans in 10 years anyways. So I know James and a few other folks asked in the chat if they should stay in an income-driven repayment plan, or they said, should I switch to public service loan forgiveness? The reality is you will do both. You'll lower your monthly payment in an income-driven repayment plan, and you'll be in that lower payment for 120 payments while you're making progress towards public service loan forgiveness. That's the combined benefit, and that's how you really get the maximum relief. Next slide, please. Now, on top of the 120 monthly payments, there's everything that's been happening related to pandemic relief. And the good news is, if you've had your student loan payments on pause during the pandemic, you are getting credits towards public service loan forgiveness, even if you haven't made any payments. And so for many borrowers, that means that they've had every month since March of 2020 qualify for PSLF without having to ever make a payment. Now, if you're on track for PSLF, that means that 1 out of every 5 years you needed for this program might be checked off just through this time period in which we've been receiving pandemic relief. So this is huge. The Savvy tool, which is our partners here on today's workshop, can help ensure that you take advantage of student loan forgiveness, particularly during this complicated time. And we're going to get into that a little later. So this is where I typically talk about public service loan forgiveness rules. I've now retitled this as standard rules because I'm going to tell you right now how public service loan forgiveness typically works. And then my friend here from Savvy, Lindsay, is going to talk about what these new temporary rules mean. But before these new rules, the standard public service loan forgiveness program required that you are paying back a federal direct loan. A direct loan is a certain kind of federal loan where the Department of Education has issued money directly to the students themselves. You needed to work for a qualifying employer, and that actually fits 1 in 4 Americans because a qualifying employer for this program can be a government entity or it can be a 501c3 nonprofit. The third piece is you need to be enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan. I mentioned the standard repayment plan, which pays off your student loans in 10 years. That technically counts, but it just doesn't make any sense because you'll pay back your loans. And then there's income-driven repayment plans. These are your affordable repayment plans. Those qualify. And for this process to be completed, a borrower will document their employment using the PSLF form. So you'll have your employer sign off that you work for a qualifying employer, and then you'll submit a final application to receive student loan forgiveness through PSLF after your 120 payments. So just to go over it, here are the standard rules. This does qualify for PSLF. You have on your left-hand side, all direct loans. And that includes direct loans for students, direct loans for graduate students, direct loans for parents, and direct loans that are consolidated through the consolidation programs. You've got these repayment plans. As I mentioned, the 10-year standard repayment qualifies. It doesn't make much sense, but it does qualify. And you have income-driven repayment plans. And I'll just reiterate, all levels of government, 501c3 nonprofits, and a few other critical public service careers qualify for the program as well. Now, I get a lot of questions about these jobs that qualify. So I want to say one thing that's important. It's not about what type of job you do. It's about who your employer is. And so you could work at, let's say, the janitorial staff at City Hall. And if your employer is the government, you qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So you see here, charitable organizations, nonprofit healthcare facilities, legal aid services all qualify. And then you also have public safety entities like police departments, fire departments, county hospitals, teachers, and all government employees. Now, under the standard rules, these things listed here that I'm going to go over did not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. I have to be very clear. The slide after this, when I pass it on to my colleague, is going to explain how the new rules allow for a lot of these things that do not qualify to now qualify until October 31st. But let me just set the stage based on what typically were problems for borrowers. So older federal family education loans, Perkins loans, loans in default, private student loans all do not qualify under the standard rules of public service loan forgiveness. Repayment plans that are not income-driven repayment plans do not qualify. So that includes extended repayment, graduated repayment, extended graduated repayment. And of course, I hear from a lot of borrowers that are in deferment and forbearance. Time in deferment and forbearance does not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And then lastly here, we've got the employers. I hear from a lot of folks that are government contractors. Technically, their employer is a for-profit business, but they do tons of work for the government. That does not qualify. Labor unions. If you work for a labor union itself, you do not qualify. If you are a employee of a nonprofit or government that just happens to be unionized, that does qualify. And then we have other types of institutions like 501c4 and other 501 organizations that are not C3s. Those do not qualify. And time spent doing religious instruction does not qualify as well. So, you can see how there's a lot of opportunities for confusion and mishaps to happen here. I'm going to pass it here to Lindsay at Savvy, who's going to talk about some of the problems that borrowers face and then explain how these new temporary rules have created an opportunity for there to be solutions. Lindsay, take it away from here.
Great. Thanks, Cody. And it's great to be with you all this evening or afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. So, as Cody sort of laid out the original rules of this public service loan forgiveness program, I will say that it began in October 1 of 2007. Okay. So 10 years later, the earliest that borrowers could start applying was October 2017. And over 100,000 borrowers applied and less than 1% were accepted into the program. And the reasons being are sort of laid out on your screen right here. These technicalities around loan type, repayment plan, and things like that basically kept many borrowers out of the program. And so the promise of the program was simple. It was if you work 10 or more years in public service, that you would have your loans forgiven. That wasn't the case. So some of the major problems, like I said, included loan type. Many borrowers were unaware that they had FFEL loans or Perkins loans that didn't qualify. And therefore, when they went to apply, were rejected and told they need to consolidate those loans into direct loans. And then from that point forward, work another 10 years or make another 120 payments. Many borrowers were rejected because they were on the wrong repayment plan. So borrowers were often enrolled in repayment plans like standard or extended or graduated that did not qualify for the program. And so again, we're rejected and told you need to start over and make another 120 qualifying payments on an income-driven repayment plan. And then there were numerous other small technicalities that basically created these administrative and clerical hurdles for borrowers trying to succeed. Many borrowers who might have made slightly late payments or not for the full amount or had their forms incorrectly processed or rejected. All of this amounted to a lot of frustration with the program. It almost became notorious. And so that's why from that point in 2017, the advocacy community, especially the folks here at Student Debt Crisis Center, have always looked out for borrowers and been pushing so hard to reform this program. And on this next slide, I'm going to show you exactly how all of those efforts sort of came to be last October. So last October, 2021, the Department of Education came out with a big announcement, essentially overhauling the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, but for a limited period of time. And they're calling this the PSLF limited waiver. Now, this limited waiver doesn't refer to a physical application or a thing. It more so refers to this period of time between last October 2021 and this coming October 31st, 2022. Okay, that is the deadline for this waiver, during which they have essentially expanded the eligibility requirements around this program. And I'm going to lay those out for you here in sort of those same three categories of loan type, repayment plan, and employer. Now, the important thing to remember here is that you can only take advantage of the benefits and maximizing your forgiveness eligibility with this sort of expanded eligibility requirements until October 31st. That doesn't mean that you need to make it to 120 before October 31st, but it does mean if you want to have your situation reviewed under these new rules, that you need to take action before October 31st. And don't worry, after this slide, I'm going to lay out exactly what that action will look like. So how have things changed under this temporary PSLF limited waiver? Well, let's talk about loan type. Whereas before, you could only get qualifying payment credit when you had a direct loan. Now you can get qualifying payment credits when you had a FEL loan. So before that consolidation, you still need, and the same goes for Perkins, you still need to consolidate a FEL or Perkins loan in order to qualify. But now you're going to be able to get credit for any payments made prior to that consolidation. So that's huge. When it comes to repayment plans, if you remember, under the original program, you could only get credits made for payments on an income-driven repayment plan or a standard plan. Well, now you can get credit for payments made on any repayment plan. Doesn't matter if you had consolidated or not. It doesn't matter if you were on standard, extended, graduated, income-driven. And on top of that, they're even counting payments that were made late within 15 days of that due date, or for the slightly less or higher amount than was required. So they've really expanded what is eligible around repayment plan. Last but not least, when it comes to employer, this one hasn't changed too much. You still need to be employed by a government entity, federal, state, local, or tribal, or any type of nonprofit 501c3. However, one thing that they have added is that you no longer need to be employed at the time you are actually applying for forgiveness. So this was a stipulation in the original rules of the program. When you, under the original rules, when you reached that 120 and you sent in that final application, you had to remain employed at a qualifying employer at the time you were applying and actually up through the time that you received actual forgiveness. Now, for some of you who've had experience with this, that processing time could take anywhere between 3 to 6 to 9 months or more. So this was really a strain on many borrowers who were looking to retire. So they have removed that qualification from the process. And so now if you have been, no longer working or retired, and you made 120 qualifying payments, you can retroactively now receive full forgiveness for the remainder of your loan balance. Also, for any of you out there who are teachers and who might have pursued a program called Teacher Loan Forgiveness and received that forgiveness, you can actually now count that period of time, so it would have been 5 years, that you put towards teacher loan forgiveness towards public service loan forgiveness. So you can get credit for both, whereas before you were not able to. You sort of had to start over after you received that teacher loan forgiveness. So all in all, what this has amounted to and how you can kind of think about it is this. Anything from October 1, 2007 to present day is fair game. That is sort of the eligible time frame that we're thinking about. And if during that time you worked for one or multiple qualifying employers, and during that time you had student debt and were making payments on that student debt, you are going to be able to get that counted as qualifying payment credits. Okay. So how do you take advantage of this? And that's what I'm going to walk through you in these sort of next slides. We're going to sort of break these down into a couple different scenarios so it's really easy to follow. So if we can turn it to the next slide, we'll start here. So the first and most important thing that you really need to determine, and this goes for everyone, regardless of whether or not you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, but I think especially if you're pursuing that program, is determining what kind of loans you have. And this is something that's not really well known to many borrowers, or it's not necessarily intuitive to think about what type of loan. You just know that you have federal loans. But actually that loan type is really important in determining your eligibility for these programs. So you can find out the type of loans you have by logging into your FSA account at studentaid.gov. You're going to visit the My Aid page on that website and scroll down to the loan breakdown section. And there you'll find a list of each and every federal loan you have ever borrowed in your lifetime, even if you've paid off the loan balance or consolidated it into a new loan. And you're going to want to look for the following. Direct loans will begin with the word direct. Okay, so if you see direct consolidation, direct subsidized, direct unsubsidized, that means you have a direct loan. These FFEL loans, FFEL, which stands for Federal Family Education Loans, there you're going to see FFEL, FFEL, or you might see FFELP. That P simply stands for program. That's going to indicate you have a FFEL loan. And then for Perkins loans, you get the gist here, it's going to say Perkins, okay? So it should be pretty easy to identify what type of loan you have. So that's sort of the first step that you need to cover here. Now, on this next slide, let's say you have at least one federal loan that is not a direct loan, okay? So you've checked your loan types, you've got one that's not a direct loan. Well, the first thing that you're going to need to do before going through any of the public service loan forgiveness paperwork is you're going to need to submit a consolidation application, okay, by October 31st to ensure that your payments are counted, all right? The Department of Ed encourages you to consolidate before using their PSLF help tool to certify employment, all right? So again, you are going to want to make sure that you have consolidated that non-direct loan into a direct loan, okay? And then you are going to want to take care of your public service loan forgiveness paperwork. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Now, let's say you have direct loans, okay, and some employment certified. So you've submitted what's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Employment Certification Form before. It's been approved, and you've already certified some credits to your name. If that's the case, the Department of Education is supposed to be awarding your additional payments that you've made automatically. So you likely had a Fed loan account already. You've maybe been moved to Mohila already. Mohila is the new servicer taking over for Fed loan. But you should have been awarded those credits that you were due automatically. So you might want to check that on either your Fed loan account, or if you've already been moved to Mohila, your Mohila account. Now, Federal Student Aid or FSA may contact or reach out to you to ask you to certify additional employment. And you're going to, want to do that again before October 31st. So you should look out in your inbox for emails from either FSA, Fed loan, or Mohila, letting you know how many additional payments they have determined to be qualifying to your account. But otherwise, you don't necessarily need to do anything until you receive an updated payment count or other communication. All right. So that's if you've got direct loans and have certified some. Now, let's say you have direct loans, but have never submitted a public service loan forgiveness form ever before. That's totally okay. What you're going to want to do is make sure that you submit a public service loan forgiveness employment certification form for any current or previous employment, all right, anything dating back to October 1, 2007, to Mohila Servicing, so that they can review your loans and your situation under these new rules and determine whether your current and past employers qualify. So you can submit this form through the PSLF help tool at studentaid.gov/PSLF. Okay. Now I will tell you all this, because there has been a huge influx of applicants due to this limited waiver, The wait times we're seeing are anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks. So this is sort of a hurry up and wait situation where you want to get your forms in, but it's going to be a while until you might hear something back. But again, you must submit these applications by October 31st, 2022. This is the most important part. And I will tell you all this, there is only one form and one form only for this program. And that is called the PSLF Employment Certification Form, or some people call it the PSLF form for short. So that's the only form for the program. It's the one you submit when you've reached 120. It's the one they encourage you to submit actually every 12 months to certify the past 12 months of credits. That's the only form there is. It gets signed off by you, the borrower, and then it gets signed off by your HR or employer, certifying that they are an eligible employer and certifying the dates of your employment and that you worked 30 or more hours. And then that's basically it. All right. So that's exactly what you need to do in order to take advantage of the limited waiver before October 31st. Okay, next slide. So let's say you tried to submit that public service loan forgiveness employment certification form, but were denied. So if the department had previously said your employer was not eligible for public service loan forgiveness, we highly encourage you to submit a new form to see if you can now receive credit towards forgiveness. You're able to find out which employers the department has already deemed eligible through that PSLF help tool. So again, that's studentaid.gov/PSLF. Remember, updates do not necessarily affect the qualifying employer rules. Employers still need to be a government organization at any level, federal, state, local, or tribal, or a 501c3 organization, right? Or a nonprofit that provides a designated public service. Okay. So if you were denied before, you absolutely should be resubmitting these forms now. You are exactly the demographic that these changes were trying to help to make sure that you were able to access the program now. Okay, on to the next slide. All right, so let's briefly talk about consolidation a little bit, because for those of you who have loan types that need to be consolidated, you're going to need to do that right away first before you tackle the public service loan forgiveness forms. So in order to become eligible for public service loan forgiveness, the loan types that need to be consolidated are Parent Plus loans and FEL loans. Okay. Now, under this PSLF limited waiver, you must consolidate those loans before the waiver deadline, which is October 31st, 2022. Now, these loan types will get treated differently. Unfortunately, Parent Plus loans were not included in the limited waiver, which means they can still become eligible for public service loan forgiveness, and they still need to be consolidated in order to do so. However, unfortunately, none of the past and prior payments that you made on those loans are eligible to count prior to consolidation. Once you consolidate, you'll basically start at zero, and you'll have to then go another 10 years or 120 payments until you're eligible. So it's an unfortunate matter of fact there. However, FEL loans were included in the limited waiver, okay, which means once you consolidate, you will be able to get credit for payments made prior to the consolidation, okay? And that might mean for many of you that you are at the 120 or past it already, or it might mean that you will get a significant boost in credits that gets you a lot closer to that 120 than you were before. So a few more notes on consolidation on this next slide. So why would I need to consolidate? Just to review here. Number one, it's to make your loan type eligible for federal programs, for example, public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment. Another reason why you would want to consolidate is to get out of default. Consolidation is sort of a get out of jail free card for default. So it can only be done once around default, but it can bring you right back into good standing. Another reason to consolidate is to include retroactive Parent Plus loan progress with other loans. So this is sort of a hack of the system right now, and I won't go into too much detail here, but if you have Parent Plus loans and you have other loans, okay, let's say other direct loans from your own schooling, and you consolidate them together, they will take on the characteristics and the progress of those other loans, meaning they won't have to start back over at zero once consolidated. So for anyone who is got Parent Plus loans and their own debt, it is in your interest to consolidate those all together. That way they can take the progress of the other loans and won't have to start back over at zero. Another reason to consolidate is to combine undergraduate and graduate loans to be given faster. Similar scenario as I described above. So if you've got different loans from different periods of time, let's say you've got a loan from 2011, okay? You've got a loan from 2018. Well, obviously, you're going to be and you've been working in public service the whole time. You're going to be closer to forgiveness on that loan from 2011, maybe even at forgiveness, than you are at the loan from 2018, right? Because you kind of want to think of them as different horses in the race. Well, if you consolidated them together, they will take the credit count of the older loan, the loan from 2011, meaning you will get forgiveness on both of those loans at the same time rather than different times and having to pay longer on that 2018 loan. So I know it's kind of a complicated concept, but this is something that you can only really take advantage of under this limited waiver. Another reason to consolidate, to retroactively claim credits for forgiveness under the PSLF limited waiver. All right, this is what we've been talking about. And last but not least, to trigger a PSLF limited waiver account review. Okay, so again, really important for those who absolutely need to, who have an older loan type, you absolutely need to consolidate if you want to become eligible for the program, but there are other reasons why you might want to consolidate otherwise, to combine loan types and to take the credit of your older loans. And you can consolidate. I see some questions coming through at studentaid.gov. Okay, under manage loans, you can go to consolidate. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to get through the process, and you can submit that right there. And it takes about 30 days total for that consolidation to go through. All right, last but not least, here to wrap things up on this next slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, and I see a lot of you in the chats and things like that have had issues and complaints around whether it's your credits weren't counted properly, you haven't heard back, etc. We want to make sure you are all aware that there are pathways to voice those complaints and have your account sort of escalated and reviewed. And that is through what's called the Department of Education's Student Loan Ombudsman. They are there to help resolve discrepancies with loan balances and payments, explain loan interest and collection charges, help you to identify options for resolving your issues. And so these complaints can actually be shared directly with the student loan ombudsman herself, Bonnie Luttrell, at this email address. Okay, so we'll put this in the chat. It is fsaombudsmanoffice@ed.gov. So my colleagues will put that in the chat for you, but I highly recommend, you sort of sometimes have to be, we can be great advocates for you here. The team at Student Debt Crisis Center will always look out for you. But contacting that ombudsman and filing that complaint is one of the most powerful things you can do if you feel like you are being wronged. All right, so I will pause there and turn it back over to Cody if we're going to take a pause for any questions, or if we're going to go straight to Joe, but on Savvy, I'm not sure.
We could do either. So why don't we just take a quick beat and we can answer a few questions here, then we'll pass it to Job and we'll save a lot of time at the end for more Q&A. But since I do have a ton coming through, we might as well address a few here. I have seen, let's see here, a few questions I wanted to address out loud for others to hear. Okay.
Cody, I saw one, if I can ask this out loud.
Yeah, sure. I've got another one right after that.
I saw someone ask, so if I have loans from before 2007, those don't count for public service loan forgiveness? And that's not the case. It's simply that any employment or payment history doesn't count from before October 1, 2007. So it's okay if your loans are from 2002 or whenever they're from, but for the purposes of public service loan forgiveness program, you're only really able to count payments and qualifying employment from October 1, 2007. So if you've been in public service since 1995, unfortunately from 1995 to 2007 is irrelevant, but from October 1, 2007 to present day, that's when you can sort of start accumulating qualifying payment credits. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Great. And Lindsay, I know I've sent this question to you several times before, but I'd love to have you clarify for folks. Kristen and a few others asked, like, how do you get your PSLF forms filled out from an employer if you no longer work for that company?
Yeah, I mean, this can be tricky. This is one of the administrative hurdles of the program. And so I recommend trying to reach out to someone in HR, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. It can be someone, maybe your past supervisor or something like that, who can sign the form. It just needs to be someone who has access to your employment record there and who can basically certify that you were in fact an employee. And if you are having problems with that, this is something, and I know Joe will talk about this in a second here, that the Savvy team helps with. We help to sort of digitize these forms and actually send them to your employers for you, and collect those signatures, and provide that sort of personalized one-on-one service so that we make sure we monitor that, because I know that that can be tough, especially if you've got if you have multiple employers going back from 2007, you'll need a form for each employer. So that can be upwards of 4 or 5 different forms that you're trying to collect and then submit before October 31st.
But, another question that came up a few times, and Jesse brought this to my attention as well, was, is there a downside to consolidating your loans if it gets you access to public service loan forgiveness? And I think this question is really important, because in the past we used to really hesitate to tell people to consolidate, but our advice has changed a bit. So, Lindsay, what's your advice for folks now?
Yeah, so I would say absolutely. Absolutely. Cody's right. We used to be very hesitant about talking about consolidation, because under the old rules of the program, a lot of people actually ended up consolidating when they didn't need to, and it reset their credit count, right? And so people are rightfully so fearful about consolidating now. But that has, under this limited waiver, and if we are given newer information at any point in time, we will certainly communicate that to you. But up until October 31st, and our team has thought about this extensively, there is absolutely no downside to consolidating, especially, in fact, if you need to, because you have an older loan type. That's when it becomes an imperative. But there are situations, like I had described before, where you might have loans from different periods of time, and maybe they're all direct. But by consolidating, you can sort of hack the system during this waiver and get them to basically take on the credit count of the older loans. And so that can jumpstart. I mean, you could go from basically having 5 credits on that one loan to 120 because you consolidated them together. There's absolutely no downside as a result of this waiver. So, if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to our team. And that's exactly what the Savvy tool is also designed to help you with, where if you're just not sure and, you sort of want to pull the trigger, but you want to just make sure, we're always here to answer those questions.
Perfect. One other question I'm going to address here, and then I'll pass it on to Job, and I'm happy to take this because it's pretty straightforward. But I saw a lot of folks, including Andrea, who said that they had applied for PSLF in the past and now and have been denied, and now they're wondering if they should apply all over again. And the answer for Andrea and others is absolutely. Lindsay mentioned the problems borrowers faced with public service loan forgiveness at the beginning of 2017, when borrowers were the first wave of borrowers were finally able to access loan forgiveness. 99% of people were denied because of all these small technical details that they were unaware of. Today, not only do borrowers know much more about their situation, we also have this temporary waiver, which has opened the door for many more to qualify. So if you've applied in the past and been denied, but you feel that you should qualify, particularly under these new temporary rules, we highly recommend you apply. And we highly recommend that you apply right away, because we want you to get in before October 31st, when these temporary rules are set to expire. Cool. So I'm going to table questions, and we'll get back to some more at the end of the presentation, but I'll pass it to Job, who I think is going to explain a little bit more about the Savvy tool, why they're here with us, and what you all can do to get help enrolling in this program.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm Job. I'm with the support team with Savvy. So I'm just going to give a quick overview on how Savvy works, as well as how you can get started. Everyone has lots of questions, and luckily Savvy is here to help answer them and make the process a little bit easier for you. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll start with a brief overview.
Our slides might be paused. Are they paused for you, Job? There we go.
There we go. So talking about Savvy, we're going to cover what we are, how we can help you, as well as give a quick overview at the end of how to use the Savvy website. So next slide. So really quick, what is Savvy? We are a tech startup. We make the process a little bit easier. It's hard to navigate on your own, but we have a tool that lets you enter all of your information, see quick, easy results, and get enrolled in PSLF right away. So our combination of technology as well as our expert knowledge helps make the process easier for you. You can reach out to us, ask us your questions, be able to get support. That way you don't have to navigate it on your own. So next slide. So this is pretty much everything Savvy can do. So once you enter your information into our tool, we are going to automatically check your eligibility for forgiveness programs like PSLF or TLF, which is teacher loan forgiveness. You can see personalized repayment and forgiveness options. So we're going to break it down and show you your specific situation and what your path forward is. We do everything digitally, so no tracking down your past employers on your own and taking them a paper form. We're going to create that digitally for you, send it off, and we'll work on getting it signed and submitted on your behalf. Our tool can also help remind you when it's time to recertify your repayment and forgiveness plans, because for people who aren't at forgiveness yet, we help you track until you get there and make sure that you're getting all of your yearly forms in so you can get forgiveness as soon as possible. We're also going to monitor new programs and policy changes. So just like this waiver we announced recently, some people might not know about that, but luckily the Savvy tool knows, and it's going to automatically check for you for every single forgiveness program you're eligible for. And then last, lots of people have been saying you have specific questions. You can get one-on-one support from student loan experts, and we are going to be able to answer your questions, give you personalized advice and paths forward. That way you are not left in the dark on anything. So next slide. So how do you get started? We have a special link that we will put in the chat for you to register with Savvy. So as SDCC members, you are able to join Savvy and use our tool for free. So once we put that link in there, you can go sign up. It'll be super easy to get started. So make sure you look out for that link in the chat. Next slide. So once you create your account, this is your main dashboard, and this is going to show you an overview of everything related to your Savvy account. So the main application that you'll start when you join is the general information application. This is where we will get all of your basic information. That way we know where you are in the process and can get started with showing you your options. So it'll show you your progress as you work through the application, so you know exactly what you've done. If there's anything else needed from you, you can see up there, it says start new form. Once you start creating those employment certification forms, you're going to be able to track that there so you can see your progress of if your HR contact is signed, if it's been submitted. So this dashboard is a great way just to see your overall progress. So if we go to the next slide, I'll show you what it looks like when we start that general information application. You'll start by entering all of the basic information like your family size, your annual income, education, all of that. That way we are able to get everything we need to give you the entire picture of your path forward. So this screen shows the employment. It's really important that you add in your employment because we are able to verify from our database if your employer is eligible for PSLF, and we're able to include that in our estimates to show you how far you've gotten towards forgiveness and how much progress you still need to make. So it's really important that you're adding in all of your past qualifying employment so that we know that they're there and we can make forms for them later on in the process. So on the next slide, we'll see perhaps one of the most important pages in the Savvy application, which is the loan sync. So on this page, this is where you will add in all of your federal and private student loans you have so that we see how much you have and can get an idea of what's going on. The easiest way to add your loans with us is to use our service called Plaid. And with this program, you just have to sign in with the same username and password as your loan servicer. It takes a couple seconds and it's the easiest way to pull in your loan types, when they were given out, your interest rates, and pretty much everything we need to know about them. Some people might not be able to use this if you don't have an online account. One reason or another, you can always add your loans in manually and enter that information yourself, or upload something called a student loan data file that you can get from student aid that'll give us everything we need. So it's very important to make sure you add your loans here so that we are able to see what you've got and give you that personalized advice and estimate your progress towards forgiveness. So on the next slide, we can see what it'll look like whenever you get to the end. So once you've added in all your information, your employers, and synced your loans, this is where we're going to give you those personalized recommendations. So we are going to estimate what your repayment options would be under an income-driven plan. So we're going to show you all of the plans you're eligible for and how much your monthly payment would be. We're also going to show you how much longer you'll have until you reach forgiveness under public service. And we'll show you exactly how much you have forgiven. So the tool automatically is going to show you the plan that will get you the most forgiveness with the lowest monthly payment, but you can still see every single one you're eligible for. So on this plan right here in the example, you can see after this person's entered their information, they'd have a monthly payment of $177. They'll reach forgiveness in about 6 years and 7 months. And that last number shows the total amount they'll get forgiven, which is about $15,000. So when you enter your information, these numbers are going to be personalized to you. And if you have any questions about them, you can always ask a Savvy support agent and we'll be able to help you understand them. So how do you contact a Savvy support agent? On the next slide, we will show you exactly how to do that. So any questions you have, how do I use the tool? I have a question about this, or you just want personalized one-on-one advice, you can reach out to our support team and we are standing by to help you out with whatever questions you may have. So no matter what page you're on in the Savvy application, there'll be a button that says, need some help, contact support. So you can send us a message, let us know exactly what's going on. We'll take a look at your account, at your loans and your employment history, and we'll be able to give you that personalized advice to keep you on track. We've also got a help center that has tons of articles, questions and answers in case you want to read through it yourself and get some more knowledge, but we always are standing by, welcome to help you out whenever you send us a message. And next slide, I think that's about it. So I will turn it back over so we can keep answering some of your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Job. I just want to reiterate too, because I know this comes up all the time. At SDCC, we're a nonprofit. We've spent years really focused on just helping borrowers. We would never bring, a product or service to you for profit. The reason our friends at Savvy are here is because they too want to help student loan borrowers. They offer their tool for free to SDCC supporters. And I'll put it in the chat one more time, but you have to use this specific link to be able to use SDCC's portal that's free. So if you want to work with Savvy to enroll or apply for these programs, please use this link. With that, I know we are almost at time, so I want to try to address as many questions as we can. So why don't we jump into it? Let's see. I see a lot of folks that want to know if their employment prior to 2007 would qualify. And I know we get this question all the time. We hear from folks who have worked as teachers for 30 years and they don't understand why they won't qualify for PSLF. So Lindsay, what's the situation with that October 2007 start date?
Yeah, so it's actually October 1, 2007, and that was when the program was created. And so unfortunately, none of the employment history or payment history before that is eligible to count, unless, at some point they decide to expand that program and make, give credit retroactively. But unfortunately for right now, anything from October 1, 2007 to present day is fair game and eligible. And unfortunately, stuff before that is not. So that's that was when the program was created and, how the rules are as right now. But as we've seen with the limited waiver, they're constantly trying to improve this program and make it more accessible and more borrowers eligible. So, we could see some further improvements in the future.
Great. I also see a lot of folks are asking about other forms of loan forgiveness. So maybe I can jump in here just to talk about something here. Those of you who have been on other workshops, you've probably noticed this is a bit of an abridged version because we really wanted to focus on public service loan forgiveness due to the temporary waiver expiring in October. There are other forms of relief for borrowers. I'm going to just touch on a few here. First and foremost, for those who attended predatory for-profit colleges, there are programs like borrower defense to repayment, closed school discharge, and even some automatic actions that the department have taken recently that may be helpful to you. I would encourage you to, go to the department's website at studentaid.gov, type in your school's name, maybe on Google, and see what's available there, because there are some automated and special relief for some schools, and then there's broader programs for others. I know I saw a couple of folks in here mention Arts Institute, who that was definitely a notable closure, and there's particular relief available to them. And then also there's other types of forgiveness. I have family that's received loan forgiveness because they were totally and permanently disabled. There's also forgiveness for folks who were defrauded by their school in the sense that they weren't given the full refund, the full total of their loan balance. More technical stuff. It's very niche. Not everyone qualifies, but if you're interested, you can go to studentaid.gov and learn more about it. We just don't have time to talk about all that today. Lindsay, what do we say to folks who are currently enrolled in school? Should they be starting to apply for PSLF? Should they keep an eye on rules in the future? What's the general advice for someone who's still in their program?
Yeah, well, I would say this: if you are still enrolled in school and on an in-school deferment, which many people take advantage of, meaning, you don't need to make payments on prior debt if you've got prior debt during that time, you are not accumulating, because of that in-school deferment status, you are not accumulating qualifying payment credits during that time. So if you are working full-time and right now while you're in school and have previous debt, I would recommend perhaps you need to call your servicer to do this. You can't do it online, to remove yourself from that status. That way you're able to take advantage of, if the payment pause gets extended and you're able to receive basically free PSLF credits, you're able to get those as well, because when you're in an in-school deferment status, you're not. But for those that, let's say this is, you don't have any debt before this, you're taking on debt for this school right now, until you go into repayment status and you start working full time, that's when you'd want to start pursuing this program and submitting these forms. So, maybe that means you can hold off a little bit, and hopefully maybe there'll be even more improvements by the time that you are ready to start working and repaying your loans and start accumulating credits.
I've seen also Scott and a few others kind of ask, if you haven't already been enrolled in an IDR program or you haven't applied for PSLF along your journey, is it too late to apply or too late to get on track for this program? Any thoughts on that, Lindsay?
No, it absolutely is not. Like I said, under this waiver, if you have not been on an income-driven repayment plan, and you've been making payments, you're able to get those payments counted towards the PSLF credits that you need. So absolutely, it's in your interest. And I would say this across the board: don't self-select here. If you think in any capacity you might be interested, you worked for a qualifying employer, you made some payments, just submit those PSLF forms before October 31st. That's absolutely what you're going to want to do. And then likely after October 31st is when you're going to want to make sure that you're on an income-driven repayment plan, because as Cody talked about earlier, that's really how you maximize the benefit around public service loan forgiveness, trying to minimize that monthly payment to maximize that forgiveness ultimately. But as far as retroactively goes, that's exactly what this waiver was intended to do, was award you credit for payments made not necessarily on an income-driven repayment plan. So it's not too late. In fact, it's the perfect time. And you're going to want to take the action of certifying any current or previous employment you might have had.
Before we hit time here, I want to also address a few questions that came in about the October 31st deadline. Lindsay, if we get past that October 31st deadline, as of right now, what will happen on the other side of that?
So as of right now, the rules and eligibility requirements are scheduled to go back to what they were before. And like I said, we've been given no other information or direction from the Department of Education or federal student aid as to if that's going to change or not. But as of right now, when this waiver ends, that will be the end of this sort of retroactive period of expanded eligibility. So that means that post that date, let's say if you took this action and consolidated post that date, you wouldn't get credit retroactively for those past payments. So that's the kind of situation we're looking at, where this is really a once in a lifetime opportunity for borrowers to take advantage of this. That's why it's so important that you are all attending this now and hopefully are going to take action, because there are millions of people out there who could be eligible, but just haven't done it, submitted the forms yet. So that's, I think, the most important lesson from today.
Great. That ended perfectly. I see we've hit time here. Thank you so much, our friends at Savvy and our entire team here at SDCC. I know it was in the chat a few times, but just a reminder, in 24 hours from today, you will receive an email that has a link to the recording, a link to the Savvy tool, and any other information and resource that could be helpful here. So keep an eye out for that. All of the things we discussed about will be readily available. So yeah, thank you all. And, let's wish for some good news and some big developments, hopefully in the near future. And we'll continue to host these events to keep you informed.
Thanks, Cody.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.